Muito obrigado. Passamos agora para lá da fronteira. E, portanto, o lobby é evidente, não tem fronteiras, mas neste caso os oradores trazem-nos experiências e começamos já com a nossa vizinha Espanha, Maria Rosa Rotondo, Presidente da APRI. Tem a palavra, por favor.
Señor Presidente, señoras y señores diputados, ilustres convidados, gostaria de agradecer a Asamblea da República a organización deste evento, para a cual é unha honra contribuir na cualidade de Presidente da Asociación de Profesionais das Relações Institucionais, APRI, en España. Portuguese is not my mother tongue, so I request your permission to follow my speech in English. My name is Maria Rosa Rotondo. I am also a lobbyist. I openly declare that, and actually I am proud to be one. I form part of the management of a company that actually operates in 5 countries of the European Union, and we also have links or alliances or whatever you call them with companies in the States and in other Latin American countries. This international practice at some point helped me to promote in Spain the Spanish Association of Lobbyists in 2007. Until then, of course, lobby was a reality in Spain, as in many other countries. However, there wasn't an association, and all the lobbyists, we operated in a very isolated manner. Actually, one of the reasons to form the association 5 years ago was to get together and be less lonely, because lobbyists, we do feel lonely. Normally, in all those countries where lobbying is not regulated. So having discussions and networking with other lobbyists, it's very useful in each country. So as I said, APRI was set up at the very end of 2007 by a group of professionals committed with the development of a professional, ethical and transparent profession in Spain. Yes, we were younger and even more idealistic than now. The difficulties we encountered in our path in Spain did not prevent us from moving ahead. These difficulties were not related, as one may think, with the opposition of the politicians or the government officials. The real problem, the real hurdle, the real obstacle that we faced was the culture. So I'm not going to get to explain more into the bad reputation that we have as lobbyists. We do have, and this reputation is unfortunately elsewhere in Europe, and I would say in the world. The reasons for this bad reputation are many. I can think of some. Definitely, there's one reason for this bad reputation, which is that corporate interests are normally not welcome by the society, which is something that, as I will explain later, is entirely wrong. So we found in Spain lack of culture, and it was an obstacle. We also found lack of transparency, and we also found, particularly important, we missed an accountability-oriented governance. Politicians do not normally want to be held responsible for their own acts or their decisions. The point I want to make is that lobbying has the same negative perception in all countries. And this is also due to the fact that society in general attributes us the influence, and this is the business of influence. This is not normally so. As we were discussing before over lunch, influence per se is not a capability that anyone can have or obtain from one day to another. Influence is not a profession. Influence is not something that you just wake up in the morning and have. No. What we do normally, in the best of cases, is persuasion. We do persuade businessmen, we do persuade our clients, we persuade politicians and decision makers, and this is our job. persuasions. If we are influential, it's because of the interests that we represent, being it consumers or workers or associations of whichever sector. So we are not influential like just by the fact that we are lobbyists. We do take a lot of work and effort into convincing decision makers to follow our ideals or to follow some set to take some decisions. Many European countries still do not have specific rules regulating lobbying. Many European countries do not officially recognize the lobbying activity. Therefore, Portugal is not an isolated case. On the contrary, actually, at this very moment, most of the countries of the European Union are either in the process of enacting or reviewing legislation about lobbying. In the UK, for example, for many, many years, the lobbying industry, the public affairs industry, has been successful in stopping and delaying regulation. British don't like registers, they don't like rules, they prefer self-regulation, they prefer codes of conduct, which they had in place. There's a very strong association called the APPC, who works very, very hard into this kind of code of conduct. However, as in many other cases, and this is very unfortunate, and it also has to do with our reputation, a recent scandal in the United Kingdom, not connected with lobbyists, because this is something that we have to live with. Most scandals have nothing to do with lobbyists, has again triggered regulation in the United Kingdom, and according to my information, there's going to be a statutory register very soon. Perhaps it will be drafted before the summer, and this, according to my information, and if this is true, it will only affect lobbyists, professional lobbyists, leaving aside other interest groups like NGOs or labor unions or law firms or even PR firms who do as much lobbying as a public affairs consultancy can do. So that's, on the one hand, the UK, who's going to be enacting very soon legislation. In Italy, they're also considering regulating about lobbying, also because of recent scandals not connected directly with lobbyists, unfortunately. In France, there is a voluntary register that is being reviewed presently. And before the summer, before the end of the year, it will probably be mandatory rather than voluntary. This is a discussion that normally takes place in all the countries in which regulation is considered at some point. At the European Union level, it's been 2 years since the Commission and the European Parliament came together and joined the register, and now it's in the process of being reviewed. The discussion of mandatory versus voluntary register is also very, very hot now in Brussels as well. And according to my information, Germany will also consider enacting rules about lobbying if the CSD wins in the general elections that will take place in September. What we have in Spain, just to give you a very quick outlook on what's happening in other European countries, is that this year, 2013, the enactment of the transparency law that arrived in the Parliament, in the Spanish Parliament in September last year, and huge corruption scandals have again reopened the debate about lobbying in our country. When I say corruption scandals, again, none of these scandals had anything to do with a lobbyist or with lobbying, not at all. However, for some reason, when people think about putting means in order to stop or prevent corruption, then lobbying comes into their minds. What I was telling in these 5 years our MPs is that Spain had a great opportunity to regulate lobbying, not as a consequence or direct consequence of a scandal, of a corruption scandal. We didn't succeed, and now in February 2013, the Prime Minister of the government, Mr. Mariano Rajoy, announced that lobbying will be regulated, and this decision is reflected in the pact and agreement of the two main political parties, which is called the Agreement in Favor of Transparency and Against Corruption. And the last point of this agreement between the two political parties is the regulation of lobbying. But nothing has happened since February 2013, and I think it will take long. It will take long, but we will have a regulation of some sort in Spain before the end of the legislature, probably, not really early. Coming one step backwards, as I said, in 2007, I helped to form APRI, the association that represents lobbyists in Spain. And in 2011, I helped, as APRI, to set up what we call, it is called the Public Affairs Community of Europe. The Public Affairs Community of Europe, it's a platform that was established in 2011 in Rome, thanks to the joint effort of APRI, the Spanish Association, and Il Chiostro, the Italian Association. Actually, if I'm here, it's largely due to the pace, because I met Joaquim, and Joaquim invited me here today. The aim of the pace is to support and provide a network to public affairs professionals across Europe and also to associations. Therefore, our aim is to help professionals at country level, professionals in isolated countries, and also the associations to help improve transparency and foster and promote discussions and even regulation about lobbying at national level. Therefore, we give a voice and space to European-wide lobbying industry. And as public affairs professionals, we're glad to give our contribution to the high-level debate on lobbying in occasions like today in Lisbon, and also last week in Paris, thanks to the organization of the OECD, who will speak later. As it has been repeatedly said, lobbying is part of the policy-making process in each country, and it should be aimed, in our view, to providing information to decision-makers, that the information they need in order to take an informed decision. And I'm not going to get into much detail because it has already been said. But what I would really like to say, is that professional, ethical, and transparent lobbying should always result in better legislation. And better legislation is not always legislation ad hoc. So we should be aimed by listening to all the parties involved at making a very, very good law, not a law that helps to a specific purpose of a very specific sector or a very specific company. We always have to look at taking decisions based on the best interest of the country in which this decision is taken. I am sure there are plenty of examples that come to your mind if you think of a legislation that is a result of a well-informed process. Finally, I would like to say that lobbying is now more international or even global than ever. On the one hand, with one message, if I can, that I would like to send to my fellow lobbyists in the room, and it's very simple advice. Get together, unite, form an association. I firmly believe, because I did this in Spain and at European level, that it will improve your image and your reputation, and subsequently the perception of lobbying in Portugal, and also, I am sure, you will help to make a better country through legislation. Thank you very much for your attention.